So, yeah, Mr. Lee Hawkins, your acclaimed memoir, I Am Nobody's Slave. We're looking forward to getting into that with you this morning. It explores 400 years of your family's journey through slavery, Jim Crow, lasting effects of intergenerational trauma. It's right up my alley.
All right. We're all about healing and empowerment, so that's good.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about your new podcast also, Must Be the Money, where you're demystifying wealth building and helping to new generation to get smarter about finances as well, which is absolutely necessary. So looking forward to getting into all of that with you, Mr. Hawkins.
Sounds good.
Now, did you and Dorian decide whether or not you all are related?
We're going to figure that out.
Yeah. We're gonna dig deep and trying to figure this out.
Okay.
There's some relation.
Aren't we all related? Come on now.
We are. Yeah, I think that's why, these Ancestry.com tests and stuff are necessary. You need to get on there and do your little check. Make sure that that person that you're dating doesn't pop up as being a connection. Because even with the way Lee was talking about his history, that migration pattern from the Carolinas to Alabama, that's the same migration pattern that my family followed into Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. And then they migrated out here to California. It's a very common pattern. So we're all cousins. Mm-hmm. More so than most groups. So y'all watch it.
What are you talking about? Like that would stop some of the brothers.
Stop it.
It's like, man, that's your cousin. Yeah, but she fine.
Stop it.
She fine. I mean, what you want me to do? It ain't my fault. She fine.
Please stop. All right, as we head to the break.
Family.
You know what I'm saying? Must run in the family. I'm just saying, what you want me to do?
As we're heading into the break, Danny, we're going to turn again to our Spotlight Artist of the Day on this 11th day of Black Music Month. We're celebrating all month long. We celebrate all year long Black music. But this is one of Beyonce's most vocally demanding hits. This is actually my favorite Beyonce song, I will say. Yes, Love on Top features 4 key changes, which is a rarity in modern pop music. I like it because it's old school. Mm-hmm. The song earned her a Grammy for Best Traditional R&B Performance and introduced a whole new generation to classic soul influences. This is a great one. I think one of her best.
You said your favorite
of all. This is my favorite.
I would agree with her.
Wow.
When I first heard this song, this was the only song I played by Beyonce.
Wow. Bring the beat in.
Yeah. When you understand the chord changes, like she mentioned,
this is the one for me.
Yeah.
Love on Top. You are listening to Radio Free 102.3 FM, KJLH. I'm Dara Starr Tucker. Stay with us. The front page continues right after this. Culture, clarity, and community, all here on the front page.
KJLH.
Well, good morning and welcome back to the front page. I am Dara Starr Tucker, here with Mr. Lee Hawkins, who is an author, a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and former Wall Street Journal editor and reporter. So welcome, Lee Hawkins Jr., to the front page.
Hey, good to see you today. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. If you want to follow Lee online, you can find him at Lee Hawkins World. That's LeeHawkins World, Lee Hawkins World. Now, we established that you and Dorian might be cousins, Mr. Hawkins. Is there any relation to the famous Hawkins family, the gospel Hawkins family?
Yeah, I think we are distant relatives because we sing too.
Oh, wow.
Hawkins from Minnesota. So, yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, Dorian sings. And does your family sing, Dorian?
Yeah, like I mentioned, my grandfather sung with the Blues Brothers.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
My mom, she sung in the choir. So, yeah, I think something in that name.
Something in the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, something about that
I sung with Brent Jones. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, the Hawkins, there's got to be a thread. Y'all need to get all of them together at some point, Dorian.
We just create like a Hawkins group.
A
family,
Hawkins mass.
Hawkins mass, yes.
Hawkins mass. I love it. Well, Lee Hawkins is the author of I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. It's a critically acclaimed memoir that traces 400 years of his Black American family's history through slavery, Jim Crow, apartheid, and the intergenerational trauma that followed. It's an introspective journey into his family's history, tracing his roots to pre-revolutionary America. That's amazing, Lee, because, I've done a little bit of dabbling in family history myself, but it's tracing those roots back farther than a few generations for a lot of us is really difficult because a lot of it just sort of cuts off. The record keeping wasn't great, and that was by design. So it's amazing that you were able to go back that far.
Yes, we have to remember that the people who were under slavery, they were commodities. So they were taxed. They were taxed for slaves. They were baptized. There were, there are all kinds of records. There are census records for Jim Crow, that whole period. And I think it's important for us to continue to dig. One way that I was able to get a lot of information was to contact the white side of my family, because most of us, over 90% of us, have over 20% DNA from the European side. And so when you talk to them and get them to open up their archives, you can learn a lot about your family through studying their family, because the families were inextricably tied.
That's really good advice, Lee. So I'm looking forward to getting into that a little bit deeper with you this morning. We also want to talk about your podcast called Must Be the Money. American Public Media's Marketplace and the BBC World Service today. They announced the launch of your podcast in May. Must Be the Money, a new podcast that premiered in May, produced in partnership with For the Culture by the Culture Media and All the Smoke Productions. The series blends personal financial strategy with cultural storytelling to demystify wealth building for audiences historically excluded from traditional financial media. So, I mean, this is absolutely necessary in our community as well. Mr. Hawkins, how did you get involved in the world of financial planning and advice?
Well, I was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal for nearly 20 years.
Wow.
And before that at two other papers as a business reporter. And so covering publicly traded companies and also doing a lot of interviews with the biggest names in sports, entertainment, and media, all the way going back to 2009, before a lot of this was happening. It helped me understand that there's a lot of wealth coming through the Black community, even especially in the hands of some of the most hyper visible people, celebrities. And I wanted to look at the way that the people who were the best and the brightest in our entertainment and sports class were able to get there, and to use them as inspiration for others. But it's not just for this show, it's not all celebrities. It's also people who are celebrities in their own right in fields like hedge funds and private equity. And we're using those people as an opportunity to teach future generations, younger generations, about generational wealth transfer, careers, all kinds of things that will help them get ahead in the world.
Well, Mr. Hawkins, your memoir, it's called I Am Nobody's Slave, by the way, and you can pick this up wherever books are sold. I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free, by Lee Hawkins. Lee Hawkins, I Am Nobody's Slave. And this traces 400 years of your family's history. What was the most surprising thing that you discovered about your history?
I think, I wanted to do this as a gift to what I call Jim Crow apartheid survivors. And what I mean by that is, when I was growing up, I grew up in Minnesota, but my father would not speak about Alabama at all. And it was a big mystery of my life. So when I became an investigative reporter, I said, you know what, I can analyze a company, but I can't tell you who my great-great-grandparents were. And when I really dug into my father's life and to my ancestors' life, I really wanted to know how the past impacted the present and the way that I was raised as a kid. And I think one of the things that really shocked me was that Jim Crow really was not just segregation or apartheid. It was a crime against humanity, that there was a lot of racial terror, and that the racial terror that we experienced a lot of times was because we acquired property, land, livestock. And so when people talk about generational wealth transfer in the Black community being denied because of the lack of the GI Bill and redlining and racial governance, they forget that also there were many Black families like mine, who's had a murderer in every generation since 1837, who had family members killed because they wanted to prosper and because they started businesses and bought land. And so this is why a show like this is very important, because we want our communities, Black and brown communities, to catch up, to have the opportunity to catch up for all of the things that their ancestors had to do and all the sacrifices that they had to make, that they weren't able to, profit a lot of times in the way that they should have.
Yeah. And when you're right in my territory, because you're talking about, this intergenerational trauma and then how this impacts our finances. Well, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where, as you know, the Greenwood massacre happened. That was Black Wall Street, and the whole history of how that was that violence went down, and it was very much a financial violence as much as it was any other kind of violence. Attempting to tear down something that Black folks were building for themselves at a time that would have been very, very difficult to make something like that happen, but they did it in spite of. And what a lot of people don't know about the history there in Greenwood is that that area wasn't even called Black Wall Street before that massacre happened. The rebuilding is what got them labeled as Black Wall Street. So they rebuilt all of that. Everything that was destroyed during that massacre was rebuilt. And if we are nothing if not resilience, but I want to ask you how that intergenerational trauma impacts the way that we make financial decisions today. How does that impact our because you have now a podcast that you're doing that specifically speaks to financial decision making, particularly within our communities. How does that the trauma that we have endured, both financial and otherwise, impact how we make decisions around finances?
Well, I think the one thing is we've only had 3 generations since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So that means that all the way up to that, there were people who had all kinds of restrictions from banks and literally grandparents who had to go to the bank in suits, right, just to be taken seriously, hoping that they could get loans. And so we have 3 generations. And I think one thing where the trauma impacted us was when our ancestors in slavery and Jim Crow weren't able to make wages or an equal wage. The generational wealth transfer a lot of times was going back a generation. That, the idea of the younger people taking care of the elders, right? And because of the fact that we've only had a few generations of people who have really been able to have more of an equal chance. And so a lot of times, if there isn't the generational wealth transfer and the property and the things that previous generations had, now we do have the opportunity. And there is a lot of excitement about being able to help our families when we become wealthy. One good example of that is when you see the draft. What is the first thing that a lot of the young men say that they want to do? They want to buy their mother a house. In other communities, that wouldn't even be a thought because mom and dad had a house because of the GI Bill and because of all of these other opportunities that Black and brown people didn't always get. And so we do not want to perpetuate the myth that Black people are not, financially literate or not doing well. I mean, we are one of the biggest consumer purchasing groups in the world, and we are very influential, but we want people to think in a much more intentional way about pooling resources in families, financial collaboration, financial literacy, and then also being very strategic about being in your career and seizing the opportunities that previous generations didn't have.
Yeah. One of the most powerful themes in your book, Mr. Hawkins, is freedom. And can you talk to us about that word freedom, what it means to you, both in terms of just your history, the history that you studied, doing this research, writing this book, and then kind of moving into the financial world that you're a part of now, in relation to money and how we think about money and how we manage it and how it impacts us. Can you talk to us about what freedom means to you?
Well, freedom to me means agency and not being limited by a stereotypical perception and definition of what it means to be Black, right? Because when I did my research, I looked at how my great-great-grandparents lived and the fact that they lived under what's called the slave code. the Alabama Slave Code of 1852. I encourage people to Google that. And there were all kinds of restrictions that they had to live by. They got 39 to 100 lashes with the whip if they were caught reading. If they were trying to buy property, if more than 4 Black people were together without a white person present, that was 39 to 100 lashes with the whip, with the bull whip, for all of them. And so our government went to great lengths for Black people to not be educated and to not be prosperous. And so through what freedom means is to understand how hard we had to fight through the generations, through the 12 generations who were enslaved and the 5 generations who lived under apartheid, just to get the opportunity that we have today. And I think for me, freedom is understanding how to redeem the sacrifices of the previous generations and work now to have a better opportunity for the present generations and the future. And so for me, it was very important to see the limitations that previous generations had. And you mentioned resilience, what they were able to do despite America in many cases. You know, my uncles, they were in World War II. And they did buy houses, despite the fact that they didn't get the GI Bill. They just had to work twice as hard. And a lot of people will tell you that their families said, work twice as hard to get equal treatment or to get an equal opportunity. And that's not an accident, because we knew that there were institutions that were actively working to punish us to the point of whipping us for trying to exercise agency. And I think one big part of my book was that I wanted to show the ways that slavery shows up in modern times and trace it all the way back to prove it, not just to talk about it. A lot of times when you hear people talking about difficult things in the community, they'll say, oh, well, that goes back to slavery, but it's just talk. It was very important for me to prove that, so that then we could start to decolonize our minds and look at ways that we can advance the bloodline going forward. And that's for every Black American family and every first and second generation immigrant family of color.
Yeah. We are talking this morning with Mr. Lee Hawkins. He is an author, a Pulitzer Prize finalist, and former Wall Street Journal and editor and reporter. He has written a book called I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. He is also the host, one of the co-hosts of the Must Be the Money podcast, which is a personal finance podcast. You can find that anywhere that podcasts are broadcast. Mr. Lee Hawkins can be found on Instagram at Lee Hawkins World, LeeHawkins World, or at LeeHawkinsJr.com if you'd like to know more about what he's up to these days. We are going to take a brief break from this conversation and come back with more of our talk about our history, kind of our shared history, because we were talking about similar migration patterns of our families, Lee. A lot of our histories are very much tied. So hearing people who have studied their history in the way that you have, it helps all of us, because we have a very similar history. Most of us share a similar history, so it is very informative to all of us. So we'll come back and talk more about how our histories can impact the way that we view finances in our own lives today. I think this is a really interesting tie-in and a conversation, considering what you're doing with your time and with your life right now, Lee. It's a very interesting progression that you have made. So looking forward to talking to you more about how our history impacts the way that we move through the world today. More with our conversation with Mr. Lee Hawkins after this. You are listening to Radio Free, 102.3 FM KJLH. I'm Dara Starr Tucker. This is The Front Page. We'll be back with more of our conversation with Lee Hawkins Jr. right after this.
Tucker.
Well, good morning and welcome back to The Front Page. I am Dara Starr Tucker, and we are here this morning speaking with Mr. Lee Hawkins, who is an author. He was a Pulitzer Prize finalist, former Wall Street Journal editor and reporter. You can find him on social media, on Instagram at Lee Hawkins World, LeeHawkinsWorld. You can also find him on his website at Lee Hawkins Jr. He's the author of a book called I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. And he is also the co-host of the Must Be the Money podcast. You can find that anywhere that podcasts are hosted. Mr. Lee Hawkins, you are an interesting one with many layers. We were talking on the break. I mentioned being from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Black Wall Street massacre, and Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, and all of that history. And it turns out that you have a very strong connection to that history.
Yes, I wrote about that with a team of reporters at the Wall Street Journal, in which we did a story called the Dreams of Jack and Daisy Scott, which was actually about how that one massacre affected a Black family through the generations. And I think that, with all of the reporting that we do at APM Marketplace, whether that be unlocking the gates, how the North led housing discrimination in America, what happened in Alabama, and now what must be the money, all of it deals with the intergenerational effects of a lot of injustice, and then how through the generations we can turn things around with economic empowerment. And so writing about the Tulsa Massacre was fascinating for me because of all the secret keeping that was kept. Most of the people who grew up in Tulsa who were Black, or even the white people who descend from people who perpetuated the violence, didn't know about it. Like, previous generations didn't talk about it. And I think that that's important for us to understand how important education and history is, so that we can understand, as I said earlier, what previous generations endured and were able to be successful despite, and how important it is for us as in the new generations to build upon that and to really utilize the new technologies and the new opportunities in education and all of the different things that we can do to prosper and to hand that down generation after generation.
Yeah, you are, as I said, I do a bit of family history myself. I kind of have dabbled in that in the past. I've done at least part of a short film on my family's history. I'm kind of an amateur documentarian in my own way, but I want to know, through your research of your own family's history, what the most surprising things that you uncovered. I mean, we talked a little bit on the break about, even some traditions around whippings, and how that has obviously, it is very obvious to me that has transferred to our community, the way that we discipline, the way that we even punish our children, and how that is very much connected to the history of the beatings and the brutalizing that we were impacted by. How has this affected your understanding of even how we discipline our own children in the present day?
Yes. Well, most of us who endured that as children know that our families loved us. But one of the things that I think America had taught us through the generation was that violence was love, that in order to make our children successful, they had to be beaten so that they would be passive and compliant, and to never, disrupt or upset the master or the police, right? And so to protect people, that's what was done. And I think that when I looked at the practice of corporal punishment, which is still illegal in 17 states, and Black children are the ones who get most of it, I realized that it was used to access our minds, to keep us from believing in ourselves and having the freedom to go out and pursue things in the world on equal footing with others. And so I think once I had to confront that issue with my own family, because I didn't want future generations to have to endure that. And so what did it teach me in terms of the freedom that it has brought me now? It gave me, the courage to go out on my own and to do, to move away from the Wall Street Journal and get into podcasting and to write a book and all of these different things that I was afraid to do before, because I was, sort of in that box of, you need to work for the same company for your whole career. Don't leave your job. Don't become an entrepreneur. And, a lot of that was just because of a lot of previous generation limitations. And as much as we love our parents and our grandparents, we have to become a source of education with the additional opportunities that we have. And on our show, we talk a lot about people going out on their own and maybe starting out in corporate America, but understanding the economy that we're in now and how much it's changed from the industrial economy. We are now in the creative economy, in the knowledge economy, in the AI economy. And it's important for us to adjust our thinking. If you tell previous generations your plans, they may not always agree with it because they may not understand it.
Yeah.
But so a lot of this is these are inextricably tied. We're inextricably tied to our past. It doesn't mean that all of the injustice that our people have gone through has to be something that will hold us back. But we do have to be aware from whence we came so that we can begin to kind of break out of all of that.
Yeah, we're talking this morning with Mr. Lee Hawkins, who is an author. He is a Pulitzer Prize finalist and former Wall Street Journal editor and reporter. You can find him on Instagram at Lee Hawkins World. You can find him at leehawkinsjr.com. He has written a book called I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. He is also the co-host of the Must Be the Money podcast. And we're talking today about how our struggles are inextricably tied to how we process through even money matters in the present day. I want to ask you, Lee, why do you think so many Black families have stories about trauma and pain that are just not talked about? You talked about secrecy. Why is secrecy such a persistent factor in our communities, and why do so many families, each one of us who are sitting here today could talk about stories in our own family's past, that little whispers of things that we heard growing up where we know we never really heard the full story, and family members that just never talked about certain things. Why do you feel that secrecy is so persistent in our community?
Well, I think because not only slavery but also Jim Crow was a crime against humanity, in which many of our families had people killed. And unlike our brothers and sisters in the Jewish community, we are still living on the site of terror, right? And so if you have family members, sometimes I go and I'll do research in the South, and I have family members who say, be careful down there now, watch your back, And it's because a lot of those older people still remember. We have to understand that Jim Crow ended only in 1964. There are more than 8 million survivors of Jim Crow, even though it's never been acknowledged as apartheid or a crime against humanity. We have 8 million people who lived through that who are alive today, more than 8 million. And a lot of my work is to educate people about Jim Crow in the way that it affected us, because a lot of those 8 million people still remember the things that they went through because it wasn't that long ago. And they don't want to talk about it because they're afraid that there will be repercussions for doing it. And it also touches them in such a tender place that that they can't talk about it. Even something as simple as getting a loan for a car or for a home. If you really think about it, 2 generations ago, there was a lot of anxiety that went with a trip to the bank, right? Or even a trip to the doctor's office. As I mentioned earlier, people used to get dressed up to the nines, hoping that somehow if they went into the nines and if they went in dressed to the nines and had up their pay stubs and their credit rating was up and everything, that they wouldn't be discriminated against despite that, right? And so that's a whole psychological reality that our great-grandparents and grandparents went through. Now, a decision like that is made over a computer. Yes, you can put in, your social security number and know within seconds whether you qualified for the loan. And so that's an opportunity that our ancestors really didn't have. And for them to go back and have to talk about the things that they went through, a lot of times they think they're protecting us by not talking about it. But I think it's important, again, to do the research like you do, so that we can gain a better understanding of them, and also to bring out healing. So we can heal through the generations. And, one last thing that I think is really important is when we talk about people dying. And a lot of times as people get older, they don't want to talk about their will. They don't want to talk about planning, because they've gone through a lot of trauma, and it's hard for them to trust sometimes even their own family. And this is what has happened. This is part of the part of the Black American story that we often don't talk about. And so having conversations in families about money is something that Must Be the Money really tries to do. We sat down Matt Barnes with his two sons who are high school basketball players getting ready for college. And they were talking about things in a very intentional way. And in an intentional way, that's what we try to do, because I think that conversations in Black and brown families about money haven't always been the easiest ones to have. And so we want to open those conversations up. And a lot of it is tied to generational trauma.
Yeah. You mentioned that uncovering all of this history within your family helped to set you free. So what do you mean by that? It sets you free from what specifically?
Well, when I was a kid, my father used to have nightmares, and I really respected him immensely. He was a big, tall, strong man, my best friend. But one of the things that would happen in the morning is I would ask him, Dad, I heard you crying out in the night. What were you dreaming about? And he would just say Alabama. And what happened for me was that I started to have my own nightmares when I was, as I became an adult. And the nightmares were about the whipping of my childhood. And so it was important for me to confront my father about that and to talk to him, and for us to begin to heal. I needed him to take some accountability. I needed to understand what it was about. And we did that. And we actually went to therapy together and everything. And the book is really kind of a blueprint for people who want to go through these exercises. Because right now we have this trend of no contact, of people not talking to previous generations. And a lot of it is about unresolved family trauma. And I think it's important because it all ties together. It is important, again, for families to sit down and talk about their history and talk about things that happen, for instance, like what we did in Unlocking the Gates. We talked about racial covenants and property deeds that said this house should never be purchased by a Black person. And if we don't have these conversations with family members, then we don't really know the history. And so the healing that I think that I had was to go back and trace and to be able to prove a lot of the things that I thought in my mind, and to confront it with my father and with previous generations. But most importantly, my nephew just got married this weekend, and we had a coffee before the wedding, and we talked about breaking generational cycles and how much it was important for him to know his history and the opportunities in this open world, this open wide world that he's about to go into. And I feel that the same way about the listeners and the viewers of Must Be the Money. People in their 20s and 30s who are just having the opportunity to seize and capitalize on opportunities previous generations didn't have. The world is open to them. So we want to give them all the tools that they need to understand. And sometimes it's important to use famous people, hypervisible symbols that people respect, just so that they can understand how those people strategize in their careers and apply those things to their own lives.
Yeah. Well, in these last moments of our conversation, I want to ask you about one of the pillars of your podcast called Must Be the Money. You not only want to show how people build wealth, but how they rebuild wealth after having lost it. Why is it important to you to talk about those setbacks and what it means to have to rebuild after losing wealth?
Oh, wow. I've talked to so many different people who have gone through that. It's important to humanize it and for people to know that it's never too late to gain financial literacy. A lot of people run into trouble with credit cards. A lot of people run into trouble, at a much smaller level than, the celebrities who go bankrupt and things. But, that can be defeating. People can internalize those things and believe that they can't get back on their feet. And a lot of times people go through hardship, such as losing their job and layoffs. I mean, right now there's been an explosion in layoffs, and people have had to learn how to recreate themselves and how to pivot and to always be doing a side hustle when they have a job and to always do their job search while they have a job, as opposed to waiting, always having connections that if you had to pivot, what would you do next, right? And so this show uses the stories of a lot of the people who are the guests in our shows to show how they were able to do it. How were they able to pivot after a layoff? We have Crystal McCrary, who was a lawyer who wasn't really happy with what she was doing. And then she went on and started to write books and movies and all kinds of things. But that wasn't something she just did, at the snap of a finger. It was something that she planned and strategized to do. And so that's what we want. We don't want people to feel defeated or to feel like their dreams are too ambitious. We want to give them the language and the strategy to be able to do it through the stories of other people.
Yeah. We have been talking this morning with Mr. Lee Hawkins, who is an author. He's a Pulitzer Prize finalist and former Wall Street Journal editor and reporter. You can find out more about Mr. Lee Hawkins at Lee Hawkins World on Instagram. That's LeeHawkinsWorld. He and Dorian are going to get together and get this Hawkins choir, this mass choir assembled.
We're going to figure this out.
You figure it out.
I'm going to hit you on LinkedIn, Dorian.
Okay, sounds good.
You can find more about him and his book at LeeHawkinsJr.com. His book is called I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free. I love the investigative stuff around our history in particular, Mr. Hawkins. And as I said, a lot of our histories are inextricably tied. So when you study your own history, you are helping us to learn more about our own history. So I thank you for that. He is also the co-host of the Must Be the Money podcast. How's the podcast doing, Mr. Hawkins?
It's doing well, and we continue to build. We're already hoping to do another season. And so if you're interested in being in the show, make sure you contact us. But, I really wanted to thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor and a privilege to be on the show, and especially because of the subjects that matter that you're covering on your show. I think that it's important that, yes, we always want to be up on the pop culture, but that doesn't mean we can't be serious at the same time, and that we can't, really talk about things in the culture that can move us forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we thank you for your time and spending a bit of it with us this morning, Mr. Lee Hawkins. Thank you so much for being with us here on the we're talking about podcast this morning, the broadcast this morning, the front page. Your book is called I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family's History Set Me Free by Lee Hawkins. You all go pick up a copy as soon as you can. Thank you so much, Mr. Hawkins, for being with us this morning.
God bless you all.
All right. Must Be the Money podcast as well. If you missed any of today's show, you can find past episodes online at KJLHradio.com/podcasts or on the KJLH app. You are listening to Radio Free 102.3 FM KJLH. Thank you for turning to the front page where our stories live and our voices lead. Stay tuned for the Steve Harvey Morning Show with Ade Lamar. I am Dara Starr Tucker. Until tomorrow, stay loud and stay lifted.